And we should try definitely to understand why we shouldn't have done it, and if possible to undo the thing that we did that was wrong, and to remember the next time. For once you do a favor for conscience, you do something it wants you to do, it is more available on the next occasion. Having some more confidence in you, your conscience begins to be more active, and it will warn you beforehand what is likely to be the consequences of a mistaken action. The Pythagoreans had an exercise for this. At the end of each day, they went over the day and estimated it. They sat in judgment upon their own conduct. They remembered in detail how they met a situation, and if their meeting of that situation was obviously not good, they studied it, thought about it, and tried to decide what they should have done instead. By following this rule every day over a period of time, they gradually anticipated their mistakes and were able to rectify them before they actually occurred. They began to realize the attitudes which were peculiarly negative, or the temptations which they as individuals had the greatest difficulty in resisting. In one person it might be one temptation, and in another person a different temptation. But each in retrospection found out his own problem, and also the consequences. And the consequences usually were sufficiently clear to form a basic documentation for a better understanding of the situations. Thus, by retrospection, we find out how much better we could have done something, how we could have prevented an antagonism from arising, how we could have forgiven a slight insult or a slight by a deeper understanding, and where it became obvious that a chilliness was developing within the structure of a family, how we could prevent this from getting worse, and how, in all probabilities, we could correct it. By retrospection, therefore, the individual finds out how much better he could have been than he was, and this discovery is usually quite valuable. Also, in the term of soul power, there is a certain contentment that comes in as an interesting factor. It has been said that man was not born to be happy, but he was capable of contentment. Happiness is a very large term. For most persons it involves considerable extravagance, and in a great many instances compromise the principles. But contentment is a state of inner peace. It is the individual who lives without regrets, an individual who has found in simple things that which is necessary for his contentment. Contentment is the recognition that he is doing what he is supposed to do at this particular moment, that he is living within a pattern of common sense, that he has reasonable control of appetites and emotions and attitudes, and that he can go to bed each night and rest well because he knows he has lived the day in a reasonably constructive manner. Comfort is important, of course, but in comparison to this problem of living in a conformable manner with principles and ideals, this is what we might term the nearest approach to basic happiness that we can know. Contentment is to be in harmony with the purposes of the soul. And this harmony means in harmonious relationship with conscience. There is nothing that we are doing that conscience says is not right. In this way we can live in a very comfortable manner within ourselves. We cannot strive for the great and exorbitant satisfaction that we think to be necessary. We can be satisfied to live in a manner which gives us internal peace. Actual obedience to conscience is the source of internal peace. There is no longer any contradictory process working in us. We believe a certain thing, and that which we believe, we do. And if we find by experience that our belief was not good, we are not ashamed to change it. We do not have to be consistent with our previous attitude. We simply have to be right. And when we are right, we are comfortable. And when we are comfortable, we are contented. And the processes of growth within ourselves are advanced. Where we break faith with our principles and are not contented, where we are no longer in a comfortable internal state, it is now becoming increasingly obvious in the world of science that our conflicts with conscience are a contributing factor to many ailments. The physical body does not flourish under conflict. The physical body is not happy when the individual must live in a state of continual remorse over his own misdeeds. The body does not flourish under excesses of any kind. The digestive system wants you to be a contented human being. And when discontent comes in, disfecture comes in with it. When the individual no longer fulfills the simple impulses of his normal conscience, the high blood pressure comes along. Then comes all kinds of medications, most of which are intended to block symptoms, the cause of which does not lie in the body, but in the psychic integration behind the body. So wherever there are efforts or trials to go against the normal, the conscience, the rightfulness, the peace, the integrity of living, the body begins to suffer. Now, no one really enjoys suffering. They do not like pain. They would prefer not to have it. And one of the ways to reduce it markedly is to reduce stress. And stress is nearly always the effort of the person to bluff his way through something that is not right. Stress is a desperate determination to fulfill willfulness. And it is, as the old Zohar says, it is from will that evil fell. The self-will is the source, in most cases, of corruption and discord. So as long as this self-will forces us to do things that are not as they should be done, we're going to be sick. And sickness, in turn, gradually becomes chronic with the habits that cause it. And while there's no possible way of saying that we can overcome all illness at the present time, or that we can live indefinitely in a corporeal body that wears out, it is perfectly possible to say that the suit of clothes we have on now is going to fit better and wear longer if we take care of the attitudes of the person in it. If we take care of the problems of our own conduct, we will have this body in a better shape longer than we would otherwise. It is our own abuses and misuses. But it's not just simply that we stand in the draft and get a cold. What we are really suffering from mostly is not a draft. It is a pressure from within the ego. It is this tremendous determination to do what we please in a universe in which the law says we must do as we should. And the conflict between self-will and the divine will goes on until man obeys. And what he must obey, and how he must obey, and when and where he must obey, are available to him in the form of the answers given by conscience. Conscience can lead him out of most of the slough of despond, which is mentioned in Pilgrim's Progress, and lead him into a contentment, an adjustment, a consistent relationship with life that is useful and purposeful. If he has mistaken submerged desires for conscience, he'll find out, because these submerged desires will not cure the problem. But where he keeps faith as the principles of life, where he is true to the grand plan of which he is a part, he will have a minimum of stress and a maximum of contentment. In fact, he may be so contented before he gets through with it that he'll actually decide that he is happy. Happiness, as the Arabian Nights tells us, must be earned. And the individual earns happiness by deserving it. And in order to deserve it, he must realize that happiness is not the fulfillment of desire. It is the correction of the impulse of desire within himself. If he desires only that which is good, desire becomes the basis of happiness or contentment. If he desires that which is not good, he can work himself to death, he can have one coronary after another, and he still will never achieve what he calls happiness. For happiness is a byproduct of doing what is next, and doing it in the best possible way that we can. The only real instructor in this thing, the most intimate of all instructors, is this inner voice within ourselves. It sometimes gets tired, and you may not hear from it for a while. It gets worn out by being constantly blocked. It is even seriously offended by being ignored forever. But if you give it an opportunity, it will continue to work joyously to help the person to get over the little problem that he faces every minute. The individual was watching his favorite television program and was in the midst of the 9th murder when the phone rang. He went to the phone, irritated because it was taking him away from a large dose of mayhem. He therefore was short on the phone, turned off the friend who phoned, told them to call some other time when they weren't so busy. In other words, busy watching murder. This was a mistake. He should have recognized the telephone call as a deliverance, as an opportunity to find some way or reason to break away from that type of problem. He should have been gracious and thoughtful and kind, and he should never have allowed his interests of this nature to offend someone else, but he might well do it. Therefore, if his conscience had been leading him, he would have been at least kindly and realized that even if he missed his favorite murder, it would probably be repeated 50 times in the next 30 days. Taking a different attitude. There are no interruptions. What is an interruption is a breather. If it's an interruption we don't like, we're unhappy about it. But whatever it is also an opportunity for the individual to express a better part of himself, to be selfless, to be more thoughtful, to be more kind, never to be rude or crude in relationship simply because he's busy pleasing himself.